Ready to go. Adam, what is up? All right. First of all, real quick, for everybody watching, this is our Facebook Live with CHATTcon speaker Adam Dreyfus. I am RyanO. We're going to be talking about really cool, exciting technology, behavior analysis, and the applications of how this could is being carried out by their team, but also how it could be applied to other areas, including animal training. This is part of our series from our platinum sponsor, Terra Nova. Make sure you check them out. We will link them down below. Adam has a fantastic talk. I want to jump straight into this. This is a part of our Seattle event. He's one of the speakers. Real quick, let's jump into welcome, man. How you doing?
It's nice to see you again. Well? I'm doing great.
Likewise. I get you in little bits. I'm excited that we have like a good 20, 30 minutes to like chat about things.
Absolutely.
It's exciting. So real quick, set the context for everybody. Like, what do you do? What's your story with like behavior analysis? How you found yourself finding like this with this passion?
Sure. Worked with kids for a good chunk of my life. Started seeing more and more kids on the spectrum. My good kid stuff didn't work. I looked around. I ended up at Columbia University's Teachers College. I went through their college program under Doug Greer, which is an astonishing program and gave me an incredible toolkit. I headed out into the world to kind of spread the news about these wonderful technologies. Mostly working in public schools, trying to kind of build models up there, not very successful. I am currently the director of the Sarah Dooley Center for Autism in Richmond, Virginia. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine walked into my office and said, hey, I do this thing, he's a social worker, called Talkspace, which is like chatting with clients. Could you do this with autism? And I looked at it, I was like, not really. That's not really how we do things, right? Like it felt very, like I kind of backed away from it. I went back to my desk, and sitting on my desk was my HR packet, and inside there was Teledoc. And I'm like, what? If docs are able to kind of do this remote thing. So we sat down and we kind of drew up like, how would you do like a legitimate ABA through a web-based platform to support parents? And Answers Now was born, and that was 2 years ago. And here we are, just closing out our final round. We've got 20 plus full-time or VCBAs working with over 300 parents, and things are going amazing.
That's crazy. So let's break this down a little bit. Like, there's a few different things. So I think one interesting thing is why technology? And my first thought there is we are a one-on-one service almost exclusively. There's other applications out there, but for me, the numbers of people that need services and requesting services, like our own field can't keep up with that demand. By my calculations, no matter how you run the numbers, like I don't even think we're gonna be able to meet the demand of autism spectrum disorder, much less other diagnoses that we work with or other areas of application that behavior analysts and other folks like that work with. So the technology is this really interesting area, right?
So a couple of different things. What we're trying to do is, I'm not trying to solve everything here. This is a very specific parent training application. And to use the vernacular, what we're doing is the transfer of expert knowledge. Our field, in my opinion, has not done a very good job of standing parents up as partners. Way back in the 70s, we demonstrated, hey, this stuff can work, and a key piece is parent involvement. And if anything, we've drifted away from that. We're hyper-specialized clinics, we're in-home stuff where the parents don't even know what's going on there. And so this is super frustrating for us. I've got 89 kids in my school, and my parents in my school, top flight ABA school, are like, I have no idea how you guys do what you do. So this is all about reducing the barrier of entry to this knowledge. And it is literally the transfer of expert knowledge through technology. Like,
So what's that look like for a parent's perspective? Like what's their kind of user journey?
Sure. So the key idea is there's this really large pile of knowledge that most of us, like that's what your BCBA, or in my case, like your behavior analytic training is all about. Is how do you access all that knowledge? So we pair a parent. A parent comes on, fills out a pretty basic questionnaire, and then boom, you are chatting with your own BCBA. It is asynchronous. It follows the same model as Talkspace and BetterHelp have kind of laid out in front of us. So you will get an answer within 12 to 24 hours about whatever your questions are. We are simultaneously building an automated version of a lot of this pile of knowledge. ABA is perfect in that it lends itself to algorithms and software. If you think of your program book, It's all pluses and minuses. So it's very binary. And so we built out a couple of automated decision trees so that we can assign to a parent. And it literally guides them step by step by step through these processes.
Okay. That's pretty fascinating. So the idea here is that you're going to help close that gap of the knowledge that they need to be able to help the person, their loved one, right? Their child or whoever.
Yeah. And so if you think about it, like the Wall Street Journal said a couple of years ago that the cost of the U.S. economy is something like $260 billion and climbing for autism. And that's lost wages, lost time, doctor's visits, all these things. So we're not, in-home clinics are clinics, schools are schools. We're trying to fall in that gap of the parents feeling isolated and overwhelmed. And what we would hope to do is, and these are measures that we're looking at and we're tracking as we move forward, is say your kid had 10 emergency room visits last year, or you had to take 7 days off of work. Maybe this year it's 5 days off of work because you understand things a little bit better. Maybe it's 8 doctor's visits instead of 10. Just be bending that curve a little bit by standing up parents. And we work with parents on like teaching your kid how to tolerate flushing toilets, having your kid sleep in his own bed, kind of quality of life issues for these parents. And like a lot of questions we get around IEPs and how do I talk to my teacher, and just building up their competence.
I love the parent angle for not only because of how you brought it up, but like that was part of our past, but like it starts to focus on also bridging that gap between like the people that know these clients way better than we do, right? In that sort of way. So we got a quick question here from Selena Schilling. So are there behavior caps? Are there behaviors you will not have through the program? So I guess what are the limitations?
Sure. So all of our clinicians operate under the BACB Code of Ethics and their own professional guidelines. So if there is a behavior that comes up or that falls outside of the scope of their practice or their comfort zone, we are not for your hyper self-injurious kid who's in a residential setting. And so our clinicians are empowered to, and we call it clinical escalating. Like they'll be like, hey, I've got a client here who said this. Because we get some stuff with, I'll give you a couple of examples. Like if the parent says that, my 17-year-old son on the spectrum has suicidal ideations. That is not what we do. It's not what we're here for. We were like, you need to contact local resources. Here's a hotline. Like that's not what we do. Another one was, I've got an 8-year-old who has gender identity issues. It's not what we do. You need to find someone. So fortunately, BCBAs are great at their guardrails, and we just stay within our guardrails.
Nice. So what's this like? How many people are working on it right now with you? Like,
we've got a full-time CEO, 2 full-time developers, a full-time marketing person, part-time marketing person, a part-time COO. So there's about 10 or 12 in our core team. There's an advisory council full of really kind of top flight behavior analytic minds that is works with us. We've got 20 plus active BCBAs on the platform and about 50 in the pipeline. It's one of the things I'm most proud of and I was most nervous about is the BCBA experience, right? Like we're kind of a two-sided company. We've got parents on one side and we've got BCBAs. We've had 0 BCBA turnover since people started. Really? And people come in, we're all like, hey, what is this? This feels kind of funny. Like I've got, and I'm like, well, try it out, right? Like I want your criticism. We're trying to build something new here. And so it's been really, we've got a little internal BCBA community. We have weekly kind of chats and people really like that they're talking to other BCBAs and sharing ideas and that part. I
assume they're remote as well. Like they're kind of spread around.
Yeah, all over the place. Yeah. I mean, contiguous United States because of
time zones.
I don't want GDPR rules about working with people outside of country. Like the rules for data in Europe and other parts of the country are very different than they are in the United States now. So we just have folks in the States.
Yeah, I remember. I think most people realize that when all the cookie banners changed across the entire the internet, right?
Exactly. They might not have known, but also they're like, I got to accept all these cookies.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So I have one other question before the one that's queued up here. What's the backstory? Like, What's the vision of this? Like, is this the entirety of the vision? Do you have more that you are looking to build here?
So I'm a behavior analyst who specializes in autism. I'm not an autism specialized who specializes in behavior. So we are kind of targeting what is our sort of domain expertise, which is autism. And frankly, one of the toughest nuts to crack. But this is literally just the transfer of expert knowledge. So you have this body of knowledge, you have experts, and you're trying to reach somebody. So in that sense, it can be other disability categories very easily. And then expanding out to even just generalized parent training. Like, hey, I got a kid, he cries all the time every time I go in the store. What do I do about that? And so that level of scalability, we also are looking at teacher supports, special education teachers. Most of our BCBAs have experience working with teachers and in schools, and so it's a really broad future.
For sure. So real quick, what's the parents' journey like? I mean, so you have a marketing team that's reaching out, and they are like, how do they find you right now? If somebody's like, this sounds awesome.
It's been totally word of mouth for much of the last year and change. We've done a whole series of different betas. If you're familiar with the platform Slack, the messaging channel, our first probably 6 beta versions were done inside of Slack, and then we built our own platform, and didn't work very well, and so we're built another one. So the parents' experience is they're mostly finding us through Facebook advertising now. We have just started in the last 3 months doing direct Facebook advertising, so most of it comes through there, and they literally just go to either the Apple Store or the Android Store. They download our app, they fill out the questionnaire, and they're dumped into, they're put into their chat room with their own clinician. That's one other thing. Like, we don't do clinician by committee. You have your own caseload, and so they get to know you personally, and that has proven to be a huge stickiness factor for it.
Okay.
Like, if
For
you're
making it work, it kind of like
right.
It helps them gel. Yeah.
It's not just whoever's up kind of answers the question. They've got Ryan, and they know that they develop a relationship with you. At this point, I've had people that I've been chatting with for over 2 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. So for them, they can literally just have expert opinions on what's going on and at their disposal, answered within 12 to 24 hours. That's it, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it from our model, it is not very much different than a lot of the stuff that we already do. I've done a lot of teacher consultation, and I come in at the end of the school day, and they share with me what data they have. Sometimes they have some, sometimes they don't. But it's more just having a conversation about their experience, and then game planning some. Another way of thinking about it is when I was doing in-home supervision, I frequently would go in and we're tracking behaviors, but I'd have a really good clinician in there, and so I wouldn't see any behaviors when I went in there because they're with this really great RBT, or I mean that's fairly new, but back then, you're a clinician, and then I show up and I'm pretty reinforcing, and so I'm reliant on other people's information to help me guide the process. And this is even kind of a level below that. Like, this is just parent training. If you take out of the whole thing of what we do in ABA, this is just the parent training part.
Okay. And so is that where you separate it? Because I think some people will be watching this and be like, we're supposed to be directly observing these things, right? So is that part of how you, like, this is a separate service in that sort of sense of it's not the direct observation, it's not the client, typical client relationship, like it's something separate?
Correct, but I don't think it's separate from how we actually operate right now. Like, I think people are like, oh, but it's, you have to observe the behavior. And I sort of flip it around a little bit and say, hey, BCBAs, are you currently, right this second, making decisions on behaviors that you are observing? Or are you relying on some other artifact, whether that's a parent report or your RBT's report or the data that they've collected? And I would say, especially in the school-based ABA model and especially in the medical model, you're not personally witnessing the behavior. So this, I think, falls into that same area.
And it's kind of a larger, like, are you really measuring what you think you're measuring at the end of the day, and is like producing those outcomes?
Well, and you're dependent on the reporting of whoever, whether that's some employee of yours or the parent or the teacher or the, whoever. Like, you're reliant on their feedback, whether that's in a partial interval data form or an anecdotal story.
Totally agree. So Joan's saying that it's the same issue that dog trainers have with like remote type training. So let's like experiment this out a little bit. There's no reason that this model shouldn't be able to, I'm not like suggesting someone do this and like, right, but like you could just like literally just like copy a very similar strategy, right?
Sure.
Just like how you were implying that you could work across diagnoses, you should be able to work across species and social issues in a very similar way, right? And because we've seen it with other in the medical industry, as you alluded to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and what I went back to when we first unpacked this, where I went to was not, hey, what is Teladoc doing? I picked up technology of teaching, and I cracked my Fred S. Keller books on personalized systems of instruction, and pulled the research on transfer of expert knowledge, designing teaching strategies, right? Like we're not inventing anything here. We're going back to, how did Skinner and Keller envision being able to teach people information that they could access in a very structured way remotely. And that's really the framework of what we're doing here.
For sure. I think there's some pretty interesting parallels too. Like anybody that's learning through an online program right now that may be skeptical of this, like you're learning through those same sort of programmed interactions. I would argue also knowing what you're using to program with, like you all are taking a very rigorous approach to the methods of how to design these sort of things. Like it is not easy to pick up those resources you just listed and start to implement them. Right.
But that's why like you assemble your team, right? Like
yes.
I've got kind of my training and it's very teacher specific, and you just held up designing teaching strategies. That was that's one of my canonical books that I refer to almost every day. So we reached out to experts in the field in design instructional design, instructional strategies. Looked at some of the models that had come out of our field, like HeadSprout, which started with a very similar idea, like how do you teach someone to read remotely, right? Like it's always been a kid sitting in your lap, and they started out similar. They had mentors and software, and they got to a point where you could drop out the mentors and the software handled 100% of the teaching, which I don't think we're going to get to that point. We want to have a kind of a human component the whole time, but it has certainly been proven that you can do this kind of stuff without being sitting right in front of somebody.
I totally agree, man. So if anyone's skeptical out there, sorry, spoiler alert. I'm on the same team. I'm on the same team as Adam. It's so there's a question on like what books you're referencing. I don't know if I have them all here. Luckily, some of them are on the shelf. So what was the original one that you referenced?
Skinner's Technology of Teaching. That was the first one because like that's the way I was taught, right? Go back to the man. He goes into great detail, especially in the back end of the chapters, because they had just like very, very early computers were available. And he goes into great detail about how you use technology to transfer knowledge through kind of structured learning. I would say that the thing that he would probably be most proud of these days would be like Khan Academy, where here's your problem, here's the sequence of learning. If you get it correct, you advance to the next level. If you don't get it correct, there's a correction procedure. In a Khan Academy, they give you a partial prompt. They give you partially the answer. If you don't get that, they give you the full answer. If they don't give you that, they model how to do the whole thing. So there's sort of a 3-step correction procedure. We have built out our algorithm very similarly with just the same kind of corrections that you would tell to somebody working with a kid sitting right there.
Very cool. Very cool. One thing that you remind me of there that we didn't even get into is like, we know how much humans err. Like the fact that you can start to take these sort of things out there could produce leaps and bounds of just changes in human behavior, or more accurate human behavior. Sometimes I like to think about like, why are iPads, like why does everybody just interact with them so fluently, and like why does it work so well? It's those ones and zeros and the way they're program designed, right? Like it is just so flawlessly organized and rigorously tested, right? Those contingencies are perfect.
Well, and like a good example is where we're at, feel like, well, you guys are just chat. I'm like, right, but we tag we have a taxonomy of tagging the different things in chat with, is it a question, is it an answer, was it a correct answer, was it an incorrect answer? And you can begin to, because we've got tens of thousands of texts going, be able to pull together optimal answers, right? Like here's the question. And so what we're going to do with that is, you might ask your BCBA a question, and the system will recognize the question and say, would you like our best answer that has worked for 90% of the people right now? So they instantly get it, and that might be enough. They might be like, oh, that works, and we can initiate the algorithm from that point.
So cool, man. Sorry, I was keeping up some of the comments. So there's
okay.
folks asking about they're asking about the different books out there. There's a whole lot of stuff. So we'll make sure that we link all those to everybody that's watching. It's so fascinating. So what else? I guess real quick, like, can you give us a highlight of what you're planning? Go ahead.
So yeah, let me back up a little bit. One of the things I love about this is you hear in the BCBA chat rooms all the time, like, what do I do with my degree, right? Like it's only autism. I'm like, that's crazy. I will tell you, I'm just like everybody else sitting out there. I run a very large school. I thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. It was kind of my dream gig. Like, it's the Sarah Dooley Center. I encourage you, if you're ever in Richmond, Virginia, we're running a very innovative hybrid model where we're combining a public school feel with clinical infrastructure, and we're sending kids back to the public schools. That's my day job. So I want to disrupt how we educate kids. We know how to do it. It's super frustrating that there's not better schools and classrooms for these kids. So we're building a model there. For this, me and my co-founder sat in a Starbucks and typed into Google, how do you start a business, right? Like, we had this idea, and so we were tucked into, it's called SCORE, and everybody should know about it. It's a local small business. It's got nothing to do with autism, nothing to do with, so we filled out their form. We got assigned a mentor. He was the first guy who like really sketched out our business plan and was like, man, this is a really good idea. That put us, we entered a little pitch competition, a little 2-day pitch competition. We came in first, won $1,000. We're like, oh, look at this. We entered another one, came in third, won $5,000. Now we're kind of in business. We got into a local accelerator, got $20,000 in non-equity diluting investment.
Nice.
My co-founder went full-time. He's like, this is happening. That put us in front of a bunch of technology people and people who were interested in helping us. We built a platform that demonstrated what it is we were doing. We got into Techstars, which is a world-famous global accelerator. That changed everything, made it a lot easier for us to get investors. So we're in conversations now with like MIT, NetLife, to help us try to figure this out. Like, this isn't just us sitting here. And then we just closed our kind of most recent round of investment, and that's going to permit us to hire some more people. And like, dare to dream, man.
Yeah, no kidding, huh?
This is super exciting stuff.
Yeah, I remember when I first ran into you, and we really chatted over at that Paris ABI International Conference. I think you just finished out like your accelerator. You just got an accelerator. I can't remember the exact timeline. This is cool, man. Congrats. First of all, high fives to everybody on your team. And like, that's awesome. And I agree with you 100% on like, if you've envisioned something, if it's got some legs to it, right? It's just a matter of putting in the work. Like, you got to start putting in the work. I would absolutely say that, like, both of us worked full time for a while. And then there was a jumping off point. How scary was that?
Well, I will tell you, Jeff Beck, who's the CEO, it was scary for him because he's the one who quit his job and jumped off, and we would not be where we are without him. It worked really well for us, and it continues to work, having me be associated with the school, because when you're in this kind of space and you're dealing with investors and people who are unfamiliar with this, credibility is huge. And so they literally, before you walk into a meeting, will Google you. And if there's no connection to what it is you're talking about, you've got a much steeper road to climb. But if they type in Adam Dreyfus and they see like 3 pages deep of autism, they're like, okay, these guys know the autism stuff. Let's see what the rest of it is. So
yeah, interesting.
It's been a really cool partnership with us, and a lot of really hard conversations. Like, do I come full time? Do I like how do we manage this? It's but it's a nice problem to have.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So what do you plan on talking about in Seattle at the event?
So I'm gonna unpack in detail sort of the guts behind Answers Now. We're gonna walk through what we've learned so far on kind of how we use engagement. We've got a platform that tracks engagement really, really tightly. And so when you see the data of like when people drop off and why do they drop off and what is stopping them we've got a bunch of people who never respond. Like, they sign up, they go through all the stuff, and they're in the room, and they never say anything. So how do we challenge that? And then I'm also going to preview the algorithm builder that we've got, and show how we build out the decision tree algorithms and how we build out automation that is not commercially available yet, but is certainly part of the future.
Okay, super cool, man. I'm excited. I'm stoked. I want to see those things now.
Right? I was like a screen share, but some of it's a little like you get to a point where you're like, we can't share this with everybody. Like this is
yeah.
No, but I mean, it's especially for a clinical group like this. I'm super excited about the lineup. Joe Lang's one of my favorite people on earth. He's been working with us on this project for about a year and a half. I read his, for me, like life-changing blog post about the use of artificial intelligence and how it can be
adapted. On that TechSig blog, right?
Right. Here's a guy that I'd learned about in college, right? He's a chapter in the ESDM book, right? Like evidence-based, where it talks about Headsprout. And I literally, I wrote that quote, and I was like, hey, I studied under Doug Greer. I studied you. I'm working on this project. It kind of sounds like what you were talking about in the blog. And now he's part. He's helping us out. And we've met a bunch of times, and he's really excited about what we're doing.
I would not be where I'm at without Joe Lang either.
Absolutely.
He would consistently reply with something that was so different from everybody else on some of the listservs, and I was like, why is someone so different than the rest of the community, Yeah. And I'd read the stuff, and I was like, I kind of get it, and I'd talk to him a little bit. And then he invited me to chat with him in Orlando, and I went. He was at a conference for something else, and it was supposed to be an hour meeting, and it was like 4 hours later. And I was just like, I don't understand the depth of anything of what he was talking about, but like I liked every second of it. And I just like walked away with a list of readings and things to go explore. And continuing, man, like he always gives back to the community. It's like one of those things that if you just like put in a little bit of work up front, he'll match you. And that's one of the coolest things about Joe and like the community of people that we have coming together at this event.
It's kind of like a little bit like parent training, where you want to see, like if you're working with a parent and you give them some tasks and they don't do any, you're like, they're probably not going to do the rest of this. So we chatted for a while, and then his emails and responses started just being research articles. Right?
Yeah.
Like I'd open up the email and he's like, here's what you need. It'd be like 4 research articles. And I'm like, here comes homework time. Like I gotta go. But that's, hey, fair enough. If you want to climb a mountain of knowledge that you don't understand, then you better be willing to do some lifting.
Yeah. Cool. Off air, I'm going to ask you some questions, not really to this, but like for a project I've got where I could maybe use some of the feedback on like how you've been navigating some of this stuff. So I just want to, before I forget, I've got this idea that is like not going away, which means I have to act on it. And it has to do with designing instruction. So cool. I'm going to do a last call for anybody that has any questions potentially. Please holler at us real quickly. We're going to be following the comment section of these things as well. Is there any like words of wisdom, anything that you want to share to the young budding analyst or the folks that are going to be coming into this event?
The things that attracted you to this field, the science of this field, the potential in this field. I know that on your day to day, you can feel really defeated, especially if you're working with really challenging kids and stuff like that. But the promise of this field is every bit as rich as it was 75 years ago. And I would say much more so, because technology has permitted us to do things that are the people that you learned with and the books that you read when you were learning, they dreamed about them, and we can do them now. And so like technology of teaching is like, that was his like, hey, this would be great if this like existed. Well, it does exist. And there's a lot of capital out there. There's a lot of people who are willing to help. There's a lot of corporate kind of stuff. Like we were working with Capital One. We've been working with Anthem, MIT. Like these are all, that seems like crazy stuff, but we're just a couple of guys out of Richmond who had an idea and followed. I will say this, we are very, very faithfully following the startup sort of path. And I can't go into exact detail that, but if you just type in how to do a startup, there's 8 zillion resources, and they all kind of follow the same arc, the same sort of investment arc, the same sort of development arc, and what you do. And we're walking down that path.
That's the recipe. Very cool, man. I'm so excited. We'll have one other startup there, Behavior Me. They're also trying to tackle just large issues like this and how do we program something that's useful. I'm so excited. Sweet. Big shout out to Joan. Thank you for helping in the comments there. To everybody, this is speaker highlight for our July 20th. Ooh, it should be 19th, 20th, 21st, because we are doing some Friday night afternoon, evening events there. Again, thank you to Terra Nova for making this happen. Adam is your superstar speaker. And I think that's it, man. Thank you so much. You can see on the air, I'm going to end the live video, but we can keep chatting, say our goodbyes and such. So bye, everybody.